Very good evening. Assalamu alaikum to all the viewers from Pakistan and Bangladesh. We have a very, very special guest, a wonderful youth with us today from Bangladesh, Mr. Shakil Ahmed. And he's doing a lot of work, especially working on, future thinking and storytelling. I just saw him, in one of the platform. We are just, you can say, we have remained part of it, and he's working as a staff right now in Bangladesh. So I approached and welcomed, and I'm really thankful to brother Shakil that his response was quite positive, and we just planned this session for you all. I hope you enjoy it. Whoever watch it live and the recorded version. Brother, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thank you, Atiq Bhai, and thank you for just finding me and reaching out, right? And I think, of course, I was asking like who are you and who's like, what have you been doing? But I think, no, given what you shared, I think I'm excited to be here and share more. So, like, assalamu alaikum to anyone who's watching, and a good time of day because if you're watching from different time zones.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you. Let's start with some of your introduction. What you have been doing in your education, where were you born, and how did you select this field of, future thinking and storytelling?
Yeah. I mean, for the journey, and of course, I was born in 1984. We call it George Orwell's year, if anyone has read the book, and of course, born on the two towers of July, the 11th of July, and I think ever since I was young, I think, of course, I was really like, I mean, I think it's for all of us that we get really influenced by the stories that we get exposed to, right? And I think, I think in the late 80s, I mean, you watch Indiana Jones and you think about archaeology and adventure, and I think a part of me was like really interested in history and finding out like where we came from, right? And I thought that, okay, how do I actually find more about history? Like, what can I do? So, and then I thought about, okay, maybe we can invent time machines, right? Like we can, and I think there was a time when I was in grade six, I think I used to say that I want to conquer time. And of course, there's a very egocentric approach that I want to conquer time. But then that led me to actually try to study time and understand more about time. And of course, the more you study about time machines, the more you understand it's not so easy to make a time machine, right? And but then that study led me to physics. So my undergraduate was in physics from the National University of Singapore, and of course, with physics you can do a lot of good things, some bad things as well, depending on what kind of physicist you are, but a lot of good things. And but also at the same time, I also felt that, I mean, if I studied physics, if I pursued a career in physics, like given the situation, like a lot of us tend to just get stuck in labs abroad or in universities abroad, because there are people who come back, they don't find the opportunities, they get frustrated. And I think a big part of me was always asking that at the end of the day, for people to solve their own problems, it's important that they can do it by themselves instead of being dependent on some other country or some higher knowledge coming to you and telling you, oh, this is how you solve your problem. But how do we, for communities in need all around the world, whether it's Bangladesh or even in a developed country, you have developing communities as well. As you can see in the US, what's happening right now, right? Wherever you are, how do communities in need actually solve their own problems? And I felt like people need better research infrastructures, better learning infrastructures, in order to solve their own problems. And that journey took me to education, right? So my master's was in educational leadership and school improvement. I used to work at the BRAC Institute of Educational Development as a researcher, and during that time, in 2012, a futurist came down from a spaceship. I'm just kidding, not from a spaceship, but a futurist came down. His name is Sohail Inayatullah. In fact, he is Pakistani as well. I mean, right now he is based in between a number of different countries, but based in Australia. But Sohail Inayatullah, he did a workshop for us, right, on the futures of BRAC University in 2030, right? And of course, we during that workshop, it was with the VC, the head of the department, and we learned about like different techniques of how we think about the future, right? And what happened was, yeah, I mean, I got excited by that, and I could see that, okay, maybe this is something that we need in order for people to solve their own problems, and to go to the for futures thinking, future studies became really interesting. So I started applying those techniques wherever I went, whichever. So I started doing the futures of secondary schools, the futures of Dhaka City, the futures of health in BRAC, or the futures and I moved on and on, and to the extent that, yeah, right now I do call myself a futurist, because essentially I won't say that I'm a fortune teller or Nostradamus or anything. I'm not predicting the future, but what we're doing is we are helping people explore the future and navigate the future. But of course, the future has not happened yet. So what you do is you look at ideas and what people think about the future, and then this whole journey, and maybe we can talk more, has also inspired me to be a storyteller as well. And I think this is why today's topic is future thinking and storytelling. And yeah, I'll just stop there. If you have more questions, and we can go deeper into that.
Right, that's really wonderful. And we start with, I would like that, our viewers should know about what is future thinking actually.
Yeah, a good question. So I think I want everyone to appreciate that over here you see that future is in plural, right? It's called futures and not future, right? It's not called future thinking, and the reason is that there's not just one future. There are a lot of futures out there, right? And of course, a lot of the times we think about, okay, there's this one future that's going to happen, but no, like each and every one on this planet has a different future in our mind, right? Every organization has a particular future, and that's why it's called futures thinking and future studies, right? The study of like possible, probable, and preferable futures that are out there, and and of course this subject, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, it's not really a very old subject. Maybe it was there in different forms, but a lot of the work emerged in the 70s, right? And I think there are a number of pioneers in this, like Jim Dater is one, who was based in the Manoa school. But of course, besides him, I mean there are a number of different futurists, and I think like my mentor in this field, who I call Sohail Inayatullah, his PhD supervisor was Jim Dater. But over the years, I think futures thinking, future studies has changed, right? I think in the beginning, you hear about Shell using a lot of futures thinking, Shell, the company, because they knew that oil and gas might be running out. Think, how do you actually change? So they think about some different scenarios, and that's why you'll see Shell also investing in renewable energies and other places as well, but using scenario methods. But I think the role of the futurist has changed. The futurist is the person who is studying futures thinking, right? It's not just about scenarios. It's not just, but a lot of the futurists is not just thinking about trends and uncertainties, but also becoming a facilitator, like being able to get people together in the same room to discuss these things. And I think even in that journey, a lot of futures are nowadays game designers as well, because in order for people to come together and brainstorm about the future, you need various interesting activities that allow people to be more creative and get together. So I think a lot of this is also did also resonate in the way that I think about education as well, of being more facilitative and being more playful and creative as well. Yeah.
That's really very interesting, very, very interesting. Shakil bhai, could you please tell us that, how storytelling can be linked with this future thinking?
Okay, sure. I think by I mean I think even when I did my first workshop on future studies, right, when we were exploring the futures of BRAC University. So over there, Sohan Anatullah shared his framework called causal layered analysis, right? In the acronym is CLA, right? And I think if you Google CLA, you'll probably find more things on it. But in a causal layered analysis, what essentially happens is that you think about an iceberg, yeah, and of course, I think by an iceberg, you only see a bit of it on top of the water, yeah, and the majority of everything is under the water, yeah, and a lot of things that we see around in our society right now, right, is basically the tip of the iceberg, right? So whatever is happening, all the problems we're having with the virus, right? All the racial tensions that are happening in different parts of the world, the even domestic violence or whatever, like economic difficulties, all that is the tip of the iceberg. And there's so many different causes and reasons for these things that are happening. And the first thing that we try to see is that we try to look at the system, like what are the different systemic reasons why these things are happening. And a lot of the times when we try to solve these problems, we try to make changes in the system. We try to come up with new laws. new policies, new interventions. But then I think maybe this is a common phenomenon in the world that we have a lot of good, well-intentioned policies and laws, but they don't get implemented on the ground. Huh? A lot of, like, for example, like, even I'll just choose one phenomenon, like the violence against women, right? For that, you'll find a good law being built. You'll see that maybe there might be more police that are put down. You might see that maybe the price of acid is increased. Whatever you're doing, but still you will see that on the iceberg level, on the tip of the iceberg, violence is still happening, right? And I think maybe in your work also, Atiq, as I heard more about you, maybe that resonates. But now, why aren't things changing, right? And then the question comes, okay, people's mindsets haven't shifted, people's philosophies, beliefs, worldviews haven't shifted, right? And so they say that in order for systems to change, your worldview or your philosophy has to shift. So as long as we have a patriarchal, male chauvinistic worldview, as long as um, that exists, no matter what changes you make in the system, you'll see that boys are still earning more than women, even in the same job. But in order to shift from a patriarchal worldview to a feminist worldview or a post-feminist worldview or humanist worldview, whichever new worldview you want, there is another layer, the most bottommost layer, and this layer is called the myth, metaphor, or narrative layer, the story layer. So all these myths and metaphors that are around us, like the idea that boys are better than girls, boys are stronger than girls, this comes to us through different types of stories. So, for example, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty will tell you that the prince is saving the princess, right? And as long as you think that that mentality that this is going to keep happening, as long as the stories are the same, then the mindsets won't change, right? So then so storytelling becomes important then. So the story then has to be, instead of boys are better than girls, it can be boys and girls are equal, or boys and girls are different, each have their own rights, or all humans are equal, right? And that sort of, and you can see some changes are happening. You look at Moana, you look at Frozen, like the female characters and the role of the female characters are shifting. And of course, this has to happen everywhere, right? Like, you think about the types of stories that we see on TV or the news, or in memes or on social media, wherever, whatever books we read, like, you will see that those are the things that are shaping our minds, which shape our systems, which shape our realities. So therefore, that got me interested in storytelling again. The reason why I say again, like, I was always interested when I was in school. I used to do plays and all that, but then I think this really gave me a framework on why storytelling was important.
Really wonderful and really great. And we all, I think, loved the storytelling from the childhood. I remember my grandmother telling different kind of, folk stories and stories
Mm.
from the past, coming from
Mm.
generations to generation. And it's really wonderful. Would you like to tell us about different ways of storytelling, please?
Okay, sure, yeah, yeah, of course. And I think one example you gave, right? And of course, even a lot of, even I think in South Asia, a lot of our storytelling is oral, yeah, because we talk to each other, we joke with each other. Like, jokes are also forms of stories, right? And I think sometimes we have to be careful, right? Because with each story, there are some beliefs and assumptions tied to it. So sometimes some folk stories might seem good, but when you think about it, they might be problematic as well. But of course, it's not to dishonor these folk stories. You can tell the story, but then it's also important to have a conversation as well after that, right? What is the story trying to say? What can we learn from it? And things like that. Or if the story is really problematic, then we can always create a new story. We can tell a new story. And and so storytelling, how does it happen? It happens through books, through movies, through dance, through poetry, through art, through social media, through memes, through jokes. Like, even when we walk on the street, the posters that you see, the speeches that you hear. So whether it's the religious mics or the political mics, like, every way in which a story can come is a way in which storytelling is done. So it's all around us, all the time.
Really wonderful and very interesting, because it depends on us that how do we identify. Otherwise, the world is full of stories around us.
Mm.
There are different stories which disempower us, and some stories are which empower us. How would
Mm.
you like to please tell us?
Yeah, and of course, I think it's not for me to judge that these are the stories that are empowering, disempowering. For each person, it's in each person's context. But of course, some things are very blatant, right? And I think so. For example, like I mean, let's think about a story, even a story like Friends, for example. You've seen the TV series Friends, yeah. And but of course, like all the characters are white. They're living in a big apartment in New York City, but then apparently apartments, you can't afford those big apartments in New York City also, right? But then it also gives like it is telling you a story of what success looks like, what fun looks like, what that looks like. But then of course you can always change that and think about Kim's Convenience. I don't know whether you watch. It's a Korean, like it's a TV series in based in Canada, right? Where basically um, it's surrounded a convenience store, right? A Korean family owns a convenience store, and over there, you see like more of like different people from different nationalities also coming and interacting, right? So it's a story that wasn't really there in the 90s, right? But then someone had to create it and bring it out. So that's one thing. I'll give you another example, right? I think because I work in education, of course, when we think about the school, of course, there's a traditional school in mind where you think about the teacher and the blackboard, and the teacher is lecturing, and everyone is disciplined. But then there are certain movies that have tried to challenge that, right? So, for example, Dead Poet Society, right? You'll think about Freedom Writers, you think about Three Idiots, you think about Tare Zameen Par, right? These are, but then of course, like when it comes to Bangladesh, we don't really have an education story out there, right? We don't have it. We don't. I mean, in fact, from what I've heard, that even within our government, like some of our officers were also see Tare Zameen Par to understand about that. But there's not really a Bangladeshi story that is there for education. And but then at this end of the day, right? I think I one of my good one of my friends and someone that I used to work with, he used to say that dreaming is not done in bullet points, right? So dreaming happens through stories, right? So you can have a lot of workshops and lectures and training, but then in order to visualize a future that you want, I mean, that image has to be there. And I think Albert Einstein talks about imagination being more important than knowledge. And I think it's really like trying to find that particular story, right? If you don't mind, I can give you one more example. Is that okay?
Yes, please, please
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, yeah. So, for example, even in
Yeah,
politics,
yeah,
right?
please, please.
Like even in politics, I mean, in whether it's Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, right? I mean, we do have our different parties always opposing each other, and of course, in our mind, the stories are that it will always be fighting against each other. But there's not a single story out there, not a single play or movie or anything that shows how two opposing parties actually worked together and did something good, right? How even the student wings of those parties, right? Like in our case, we have Awami League BNP or JP or whatnot, but basically not a single story where, like, even though there are oppositions, for them to work together and to build a better world, right? Not a single story out there, right? But all the stories that we see is from the news, thinking that we keep on fighting, we keep on doing that. But if it's not in our minds, like if you can't imagine it, then you can't do it. And a question, and that's the power of stories. Like, how do you actually even create the world that we want and need? And are those stories being told or not being told? Yeah.
Really nice, really quite amazing, and I'm getting motivated more to study more about it, in detail, and take more help from you. Is future studies taken as a subject nowadays? People are studying it as a subject, or
Hmm.
still it is just like used as a
Interesting.
training workshop?
Interesting, and of course, and this is my opinion. I think different people out there will have different opinions. I think future studies is obviously not a popular subject in universities around the world, right? I think only a handful of universities around the world actually teach it as a subject. So, for example, one of the most notable ones is Tamkang University in Taiwan. For them, where future studies is a compulsory subject for all undergraduate students, right? But then, of course, there are universities like the University of Sunshine Coast in Australia, or there are universities like the University of Hawaii I mentioned, or in like in OCAD in Canada. There's that. There's a free University of Berlin. There's some in Texas as well. And but at the end of the day, right? It's something that I think is getting more and more recognized as something that's important. Of course, a lot of universities will take things from future studies and put it into their subjects, right? So, for example, in strategic design and all that, you will find that as well, right? But yeah, I mean, I think hopefully, I mean, even universities in Bangladesh or Pakistan and India, if they find the usefulness in it, hopefully one day this will be a subject in our universities as well. But sometimes one has to be careful also, right? Sometimes, what happens is that you try to create a new subject, a new discipline, then you have all these new experts coming out, professionals coming out, who don't allow innovation in the subject to happen, right? Because they become the experts and no one can talk about the subjects anymore. So we also don't want that. We want future studies to also continue to be inclusive of multiple voices. That is there, but I think for in order for us people to understand it, for people to dissect it, I think it's okay to have a postgraduate program initially, and of course, but I think it should be taught even in schools, right? Even in schools, like we talk a lot about history, but we don't talk necessarily much about the future, right? Because but then we are teaching for the future, right? We are so what's going to happen out there? We keep saying that the jobs that are currently exist, by the time the children graduate, the jobs will be different, right? So it's important for children to actually have that appreciation and know that I can say that I'm going to do this today, but what you're saying right now might not exist in 20 or 30 years. No? So how can you be more adaptive to whatever is happening? And of course, I mean, that's what we're doing right now, adapting given the virus. Huh? So, so yeah, so those are some things that come to
Actually,
mind.
and it's really right now it fits here because when we see about the COVID-19, everything, the world order is changed, all the paradigm is changed, the way of thinking is changed, the way of doing is changed. So
Mm,
I believe that this subject is really needed to be taught, is needed to be studied to
mm,
have, the better result, to just even face different kind of disasters and, find the solutions of big problems.
mm.
Shakil bhai, you studied in one of good university from Singapore. You came back to Bangladesh. Mostly what it happens that especially I would say these are South Asian countries. Whatever the subject is being studied, people find the job in the relevant field and just try to settle down. How did you
Mm.
left? You left everything and you became a storyteller. How did it happen? What made you
Oh,
do it?
no, no. I mean, thank you for that question. And I think whatever values I will share now or opinions I will share now, of course, don't necessarily have to be shared by everyone, right? I think different people have different reasons for the choices they make in life. But having said that, I think a number of different things. Maybe one thing that I should tell you that even though I was born in Dhaka in 1984, like when I was 1 year old, we went to Canada. Yeah, so because my dad was doing his PhD, and of course I was there for 6 years. Yeah, in Canada growing up. And even then, I think there was a time where I think my dad was also offered Canadian citizenship, but then he didn't take it. Like he didn't want it. He said like he's not going to be staying there. He'll be coming back to Bangladesh and working. So of course that story is also there in my mind. But at the same time, I think when it came to me, even I was offered Singapore PR as an invitation to offer, but then I didn't go for it because I also thought that maybe I won't be staying in Singapore and whatnot. And of course, a lot of my friends were like, "Shakil, why did you let it go? Like we're all trying so hard to get PR, and you just dismiss it. That's an insult to our existence, huh?" But but then of course it's different choices for different people. Um, I I mean I think I'll be a bit little careful here in explaining my stance. That I think on one hand, like of course, like I think a part of me was patriotic and a nationalist and all that, right? But then I think over the years, right? I think I find these concepts also being potentially dangerous as well, right? Because a lot of the reasons why our wars happen or our misunderstanding happen is because of blind patriotism, blind nationalism, right? Because I mean, right now Bangladesh is just 49 years old, but humanity has lived for so long, huh? And of course we don't know where things are going to be in 100 years and 200 years and whatnot. And you see, like we have so many Rohingya refugees coming to Bangladesh, right? And refugees are not a problem just in between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Like in different parts of the world, you will see people who are stateless, people fighting, but fighting for what, right? And that's the thing, right? Like I think I mean these concepts. I mean, we of course it's easy to blame the British for planting the seeds of difference and whatnot. But then at the end of the day, like it's all about people and humans, right? And of course borders and everything are things that we have created. And and I mean and the reason why I came back is not just because of my blind nationalism or anything, because I was thinking that where would I be effective in this world, right? Like who am I to go to Madagascar? Who am I to go to Peru or to Morocco or to Eritrea? Like I can go there and say, "Hey, I'm Shakil. I'm here to help you," but I don't even know their language or their culture or anything. And I thought that where where am I? Can I potentially be useful the most? And I felt like in like Singapore has already done a pretty good job. They have enough people taking care of it, right? And I felt like in Bangladesh there are a lot of different things that we can work on, right? And of course, even in Bangladesh, I will not say that I'm a Bangladeshi, but it doesn't mean that I know each and every context in Bangladesh, right? Right now, I live in a certain part of the Dhaka. We call it Gulshan, but of course, even besides Gulshan, we have other areas like Badda or Korail. Like even in respect to Korail and to Badda, I am a foreigner, right? Because I don't live there, I don't know the context there, right? Even when I walk in there, people will know whether I'm a local or not a local, right? And I'm sure even in Pakistan, you also find that there are different areas that you are relatively a foreigner to those areas as well, right? And so, but the thing is that I still felt like even if there are differences, at least there's some connection. That at least I can speak the language, I can try to do work. And the idea is that work wherever you think you can do best, and be able to share that with other parts of the world, right? Like whoever needs that help. So I think that really drove me and my thinking for coming back here and continuing to work here. Yeah.
Really inspiring. It is really interesting, and definitely the one who follows, inside the follows his soul definitely finds the way. And I am really very happy to listen this short story, because it may have, a lot of further stories to tell, that how did it all happen. Sometime we need another, at least
Mm.
1 hour or 1.5 hour session, where we would like to listen your life story, that how did you go, and how about Canada, and then Canada back Bangladesh, then Singapore, and
Mm.
then by settling down. And definitely there are a lot of differences in the developed countries and our
Mm.
countries. So we'll definitely love to have your time again once that. Shakil
Yeah.
bhai,
No.
please do tell that how do you see our youngsters, our youth
Mm.
right now, when you talk about in the context of futurist studies, how do you see our youth? How are they? Are they very good at this thing to see? Are they good at the foreseeing? Are they good at to know that what to do, how things may change, and how they can
Mm.
respond?
Firstly, I think of course it's difficult for me to speak about so many people at the same time. Like, and of course, I think also having a nuanced understanding of what youth is. I mean, youth can be a narrow category, it can be a broad category, right? 15 to 35. We talk about youth also being old people with a youthful attitude or disposition as youth, and sometimes you have young people who are pretty old already, right, in their thinking. But then I think I mean, of course, I mean, we do hear certain words and phrases that the youth is the next generation. The young people will save this world. But I feel that this world belongs to everyone, right? Like whether you're a child or an old person, like I think everyone has a part to play, right? So sometimes don't shift the blame or the responsibility on the younger generation. Like you're still living in this life, and you have it is your world as well. And of course, I think we all have to work together. And I think there are some advantages to youth, obviously, because I think I mean a lot of them don't necessarily have to have the responsibilities yet of like taking care of a family or a job. But then that also gives them the freedom to continue to learn and build their skills and build their craft. Because sometimes once you become a very busy person, it's very difficult for you to learn. I mean, in the sense that because what I'm trying to say is that like imagine you're a minister or CEO of a company, and all the time you have these meetings and all that. Like you don't have time to do your research anymore, right? So whatever is your mindset, you will make those decisions, right? So I think it's important that young people really like hone their craft, so that when you get to it, when you become someone that has to, who's constantly busy, you can make the right decisions in a split session. And I think that it's important. Otherwise, you end up having people who haven't read much, who don't know what they're talking about. They're in those positions because of how things have turned out, and they're having to make decisions which affect millions of people. And I think as a result of that, you see our health systems, you see our education systems, you see how things are running out. So it's important that I think that youth are able to use what time they have. But also at the same time, I think, I mean, it's easy for me to say all that, but at the same time, I think, I mean, if you're very young, you should also be able to play and not always think about. I think a lot of the reasons why we see youth having to step up and do cross-sectional campaign, because they're just frustrated and not having a space where they can be young and play. Yeah, and but I think that responsibility lies on each and every one of us to create a world. I think, and sorry, and I think it's not just for young people to play. I think even old people should be able to play as well, right? So I think how can we
Right.
create a world where we can all play, right? So
Definitely, definitely. I agree with your statement that it is the role for everyone. We all have to try to play our roles, in whatever the age categories, whatever the mental
mm,
growth we have, we need to
mm.
contribute. Shakil bhai, do tell us that how one can become an influential storyteller.
How can one become an influential storyteller? I think there's one thing that I kind of missed out when I was explaining this iceberg and the CLA, that there are different roles that different people can play, right? So when I gave the example of violence against women, right? So over there, you know that like the women who are getting affected, the men who are perpetrating the crime, the women who are also encouraging it, the police who are trying to stop it, like all these people are in the tip of the iceberg. But the system level is the policymakers. They're the ones who are making the change. At the worldview level, at the belief philosophy level, it's the philosophers, the intellectuals. They're the ones who are coming up with new isms like capitalism, socialism, those sorts of isms. But the bottommost is the storyteller, right? And I said the storytellers can be like all sorts, right? They can be artists, they can be dancers, even meme. I think meme makers are storytellers, and journalists, right? Journalists are telling stories, right? I think there is nothing called objective journalism, right? Every journalism is subjective, and I think it's really important in these times for us to appreciate that 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 and I think Alan de Botton, another philosopher, talks about this, that the role that the news plays is that we think that we send children to school and university and that's it, but then throughout our lives, the news is the one educational tool that we're constantly learning from each and every day. Like everything that our reality is being shaped by the news. So of course there are extremely influential storytellers as journalists as well, and I feel that journalists also have a responsibility of how they interpret or shape the stories that they're putting out there. So that's one. But at the same time, of course, like I think, like you don't necessarily just have to be a storyteller explicitly. Some people should definitely focus on it, but then I think you can be doing other things and be a storyteller at the same time. I'll give you some middle examples. So for example, Jean-Paul Sartre, he's a French philosopher. He was a storyteller. He used to write plays, but he was also an activist at the same time. Rabindranath Tagore, or Rabindranath Thakur, that's how we call him. He he was obviously he was a poet, he was a playwright, he was a storyteller of all sorts, but at the same time he was a philosopher, right? He used to write about he's one of the first philosophers that criticized nationalism. So it's kind of funny that he's a critic of nationalism, but he also is the one whose work became a national anthem in two countries, and or almost three countries, right? But at the same time, he was a philosopher of education. He was a administrator as well, so a systems person as well, because he came up with the universities and the schools, and he was a teacher as well. So so you can have multiple different roles and be a storyteller as well. And of course, I think even when we're talking to our children, we're talking to our family, we're telling stories. So that's there. Now, having said all this, like your question about how do you be an influential storyteller or good storyteller, and there are some good storytelling principles out there. Okay. So, for example, I'll give you small framework so that it doesn't become like a lecture in itself. So, one framework is, of course, uh, the framework of hook, hold, and payoff. Right? Hook, hold, and payoff. What does this mean? That means that any good story can have a hook. That means how do you get the audience's attention in? So, for example, for a YouTube video or a Facebook newsfeed video, the hook has to be strong because if it's boring, people will just go there. But an art film can the hook can be a little slower because you're watching it; it's so slow and you're in it, right? But ads for advertisements, the hook has to be strong. So, hook is one thing. The hold is how do you engage the audience? How do you put their attention? How do they? So, for example, if audiences don't find this video interesting, they will just move on because the hold is not that strong. And at the end of it, right, is the payoff. Like, I spent this time listening to your story. What am I getting at the end? Am I learning something new? Am I feeling a certain way? So that thing helps. So that's one, a hook, a hold, and a payoff. And the reason why I share that, because I use that everywhere, right? It's not just in stories, but even in this video, right? This thing that we're doing in, right? You try to hook people in with the posters, the flyers, and all that. But then how it's through our interaction and questioning, we try to hold the audience's attention. But at the end of it, the audience will be like, okay, what did I get out of it by watching this whole video? And that's the payoff. So it's important so that's one thing. One last thing that maybe one last framework that I think is also important is that I think I've learned quite a lot of things from theater and from acting, right? So when it comes to acting, there's a framework one of my acting coaches taught me. His name is Sean. The idea that there are three types of things you can prepare yourself as an actor. You can prepare yourself intellectually, emotionally, and physically, right? So that means that as an actor, when you're reading a script, you understand, okay, why did the character do this? What is the character going to do? You intellectually understand. Emotionally means you feel the emotions of the character that you're going to play. And physically means you need to physically prepare yourself. You need to like change your costumes. You need to change your body posture, your voice, whatever it is. But if you think about it, that we are actors every day, like in every different role. Atiq bhai, right now you're acting in front of me. When you go home, you'll be acting in front of your other employees or whoever. You'll be acting. So we're all acting in different ways. So it's also important that even as in order to be good in our roles, we also prepare ourselves in those three ways. We prepare ourselves intellectually, we prepare ourselves emotionally, and that's why mental health, well-being, mindfulness is so important. But also we prepare ourselves physically. That's why health is important. Of course, if we have the virus today, then we can't do anything today. So even to be a good actor in whatever role you're playing, that's also important. Yeah. So those things are some ways of being good influential storytellers. Yeah.
Very interesting, really very interesting. I'm just keep noting down the points. I'm, just feeling really very interesting. Shakil bhai, in the end, I would like to have a message from you, whatever you like to just, convey through over this program, please.
Okay, sure. I mean, the message is like I think for everyone watching is to basically find yourself. And of course, I mean it's very easier said than done, but know that you have a role to play in the future that we want. Like each and every one of you, whoever you are, right? And you can see, right? You have a role to play in visible realities. You have a role to play in systems and policy making. You have a role to play. You have a role to play when it comes to philosophies and worldviews, and all that. You have a role to play in storytelling, and and the reason why I like this because like and you I think that you've heard about STEM subjects, yeah, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, like and of course there's a big push on STEM. But then a lot of the places you see the arts and humanities are being defunded and closing down the universities. A lot of universities don't even private universities don't even offer those subjects at all, right? But what is happening is that even if you want more, and there's a push that you want more children, more students to study the STEM subjects, more women to also study the STEM subjects. But then even if it's that thing that's happening, you have to change people's beliefs and worldviews, right? But the mindset work is not the work done by scientists and engineers, right? It's done by the humanities, like the philosophers. They're the ones who change your beliefs that you have about science or anything. And the storytelling part is done by the arts. So in a way, whichever world you want to go towards, you need the humanities and the arts. And the thing is, people who don't don't want to change the world, people who want to maintain the status quo, people who want to be in their positions of power, they're the ones who don't want humanities and arts to flourish, right? Because they can, and it doesn't matter whether you're a communist state or a capitalist state, democratic state, whatever state, is the same story, right? That the arts and humanities sometimes are challenged, right? And it's important that if we and that's okay, but if we are able, if arts and humanities can work together, that despite all the differences we have, despite all our different interests, how can we actually create a world where even if we don't agree with each other, we can still navigate the tension and work together? And for that, I think a beautiful story must be told, because right now what is happening is that we're writing a story, but what do you want people 50 years from now, 60 years from now, to talk about 2020? Do you want to show people that we have failed, or we've actually worked together to make a better world? So the stories are being written, and even those who are writing right now are also forming the stories. Do you want to write stories that keep talking about the negativity and the panic and the anxiety, or can we write the stories where people are actually being able to work together and fight, and be able to make this a better place? So I think, guys, let's work together, find your place. And I think hopefully, even though it takes time, we each have a responsibility, and hopefully we can all get out of this.
Amazing, amazing, really interesting. Viewers, with us today is our special guest, Shakil Ahmed Bhai from Bangladesh. He's a futurist and a storyteller. And as you have just heard him, a very, very interesting thing. I guess a lot of things he has given us the clues to do more research. Like he talked about CLA, he talked about, his own workshops and the other things. A lot of things are to learn there. We are really thankful to you, Shakil Bhai, for your precious time, and would request you for the future as well that keep, sharing your rich ideas, your futurist ideas with our viewers, so we can have you again and again. Thank
Okay.
you very much
Well,
to you.
yeah, thank you, Atiq Bhai, for your time, and hope you have a good day and a good next few months and years. Thank you.